What's up guys? Welcome to the shed. I've closed the door, so there shouldn't be much road noise, but I'm consciously aware of the echo that's going on, so let's see what happens with that. Today I want to talk about why static stretching doesn't work for the majority of people. Hopefully the clickbaity title has grabbed your attention and dragged you into my little net of knowledge, but essentially what we're going to do is unpack the general psychology of your typical person and explore ways that we can manipulate and exploit that for improving things like general ranges of motion or mobility. Because typically most people, they seek a change in sensation, but they're not willing to confront the discomfort that they need to go through in order to get that change. And when we just seek changes in sensation, that's where we can start to fall into the trap of analgesics or anti-inflammatories. And they have a purpose. They're tools that are used for great things, but if we're using those just to change sensation or desensitize, we're not learning anything about our body and our body's ability to tolerate stress and discomfort. And so here's why static stretching doesn't work for most people. When we jump into a stretch, we get exposed to an end range that bombards our nervous system with a lot of stimulus, a lot of sensation, a lot of feeling, because we've created a lot of tension within the system. And I'm not just talking about muscles, even though a lot of people will sit in a static stretch thinking that they're stretching muscles. And let's think about what we're talking about when we get into end range in terms of tension. So, if I was just to jump into a typical hip flexor stretch, I'm now in my end range for hip extension, and I'm feeling a lot of tension through the front of this leg and into my hip. And if we consider not just the muscles, but also the fact that we've got joints that are moving, we also then have to consider the tissues that are attached to those joints. So we've got ligaments that attach joints to joints, we've got tendons that attach joints to muscles, and we've got neural tissues that sit within our system that go from our spine, and some of them all the way down to the end of the foot, sit in one long strand, and they pass through many, many muscles on the way down. So we are getting a stretch or a tensioning of ligaments, tendons, muscles, and nerve tissue, plus the fascia that encapsulates all of that. And if any one of these 5 pieces of tissue become impeded or get tensioned, we feel that. And that is the feeling of a stretch. But we have to understand that with some of these, that feeling can be quite extreme. And so sitting in a static stretch, while is a very popular modality for many people around the world, may not be the appropriate modality for somebody that doesn't know how to breathe and be comfortable exposing themselves to such a broad range of stimulus. And particularly with people that have neural adhesion or neural stiffness through some of that neural tissue, nerve pain or nerve stretching can be quite extreme and aggressive. And so we need to simply learn how to do it. And lucky I have a system that's in place, and I'll put a link in the description below, but I use breathing as a way to help people navigate this discomfort and desensitize themselves to stress and stimulus. We can use breathing as a way to create tension within the system. And I'll show you exactly what that looks like right now. I'm completely relaxed through my upper body. I mean, obviously I've got my postural muscles supporting me because gravity is imposed, but let's assume that I'm not holding any rigid tension. My shoulders are just comfortable where they are. My neck is quite comfortable. I don't feel particularly tense through my neck and my shoulders, but when I take a deep breath, I want you to watch what happens to my neck and my shoulders and even my ribs. So when I take that deep breath in, we see the shoulder girdle lift and the neck expand, and even the ribs inflate forwards, laterally, through the back as well. And what we're seeing is all of the musculature that's associated with my neck, my shoulder, and my ribs I'm creating tension in those pieces, those muscle pieces, because those muscles have to get involved if I want to take a deep breath to move structures out of the way so my lungs can inflate, so my diaphragm can move. And a lot of people aren't aware that this system is creating tension. That's a lot of tension. And I want to know if you can let the tension go, or if you're one of those people that creates more tension as they breathe away all of that air that they've just brought in. If you're someone that doesn't know how to breathe in a way that creates tension and lets the tension go, you're going to find static stretching very, very challenging, and therefore static stretching isn't going to work for you because you have to learn how to navigate the discomfort that you're experiencing and exposing yourself to. And so I use breathing. It's one of the lowest levels of function that we have. It's one of the first things we do when we're born, and it's one of the last things that we get assessed when we go and see a clinician or a coach. I like to start with breathing because if someone can't breathe properly, then if I put my hands on them and try to mobilize a joint or find a particularly stubborn piece of tissue or fascia or a very sensitive piece of tissue and I try to use my hands to work it and they don't know how to navigate that stimulus, they're just going to get tense. And so we can use breathing as a way to create tension and take away tension without sitting in end ranges that are potentially too uncomfortable. Let me give you an example. I'm going to tension my anterior chain by sitting myself back and onto my hands. And this position is quite comfortable for me, obviously, because I can have a conversation and I can breathe. Now I'm going to take myself into my end range and watch what happens to my face and my breathing. First, I'm just going to have a couple of breaths. And then I'm going to move into my end range. So I held that for as long as I could. I was embellishing a little for the camera and trying to put some ego into that one. I probably held that for 5 seconds longer than I wanted to, but again, the camera's on me, so I wanted to show you that I struggled to breathe, and I think I got 3 breaths in 5 seconds. That means that I was breathing at a rate of 36 breaths a minute. That's a lot of breathing. So breathing really rapidly across 5 seconds while I hold a position I can't own isn't effective for me. Instead, let's take that same position, but let's use breathing as a tool to tension the system. So, I'm not in my end range here because I can breathe and have a conversation. Instead, what I'll try and do is switch on a couple of pieces around my hips. So I'm just coaxing that end range. So this is starting to feel a little bit uncomfortable, particularly through my shoulders, but mostly through my my quads. And now I'm going to take a nice deep breath. So at the top of each of those inhales, I felt tension build in my quads and my shoulders, the pieces that felt uncomfortable. And watch the magic that occurs now. That's not my end range. That feels quite comfortable. I felt like I was close to this before and I couldn't breathe, I couldn't own it. This is fine. I'm actually quite comfortable here. Let's breathe. Very annoying fly. A couple of breaths and it's quite comfortable. I can still breathe. Piss off. So we're already seeing that we're thinking about the same thing just in a different way, which is my favorite thing to do. I always say in my philosophy here at Principles of Performance is I don't want to change the way you treat or train. I don't want to change the way you stretch. I want to change the way you think. And then that might change the way that you treat or coach or program or cue or train or stretch. We're doing the same thing, we're just attacking it from a different, well, let's actually change that terminology straight away. We're not attacking it. We're breathing into it. We're creating an exposure stimulus rather than a stress. We're creating an exposure, and that exposure is, here is close to your limit. Now do some breathing and see if you can create a change here that makes it more comfortable. Once you have, now go and explore a little bit further. You can see that it's quite easy for me to manage and hold that position and have a conversation. So it's fine for my nervous system to be exposed to that range, exposed rather than stressed. And then when I've done a few breaths, I can move into a new range and explore myself a little further and expose those end ranges a little further. This is the correct way, in my opinion, to tackle not just stretching, but everything that we do. Breathing should be the dictator that says, yes, this is okay, or no, this isn't okay. Because the first thing that goes when you expose yourself to a position you don't own, to a stress that's too much, is your breathing. We gasp, or we shrug, or we create tension. If you're somebody that suffers from, headaches or specific chronic pain in certain regions, that's not necessarily saying something's wrong, it's just saying something needs to change. And I like to start with breathing. Breathing is the dictator. If you can't breathe into a position or a shape, you don't own it. And if you don't own it, it's going to bite you on the bum one day. So this is my opinion, a professional opinion, based on a lot of experience in the industry, on why static stretching doesn't work for many people. Understand that I believe static stretching is very important, and I believe that you can get a lot of benefit out of it, but not if you don't do it properly. We even see this in modernized Western yoga, where you go to a class and you see that there are a lot of people struggling to hold a position, and they're not coached. They're instructed, but they're not coached to find a position they're comfortable in so that they can breathe. Breathing is the adapter, breathing is the adopter. We want to adapt and adopt new positions. But you can go to a modern Western yoga class and see that there are people struggling because they're trying to force positions. They're trying to keep up with everybody else around them. And that's not the way. That's not the way. And we do that in training as well, and that's not the way. You have to find your way, and your breath is the key. Anyway, that's enough of a rant for today. I hope you got something out of this. If you've got any questions, please shoot them to me or pop them down below. What do you think? Do you think that static stretching is an effective tool? Why? Why not? I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Anyway, thanks so much. Enjoy your Friday, and I will see you on the next video.